Here we are at the Flow State Stages, one of the new performance arts spaces that has been built at South Bank, at the South Bank Parklands, where the old Arbour View cafes used to be. I don't know if you remember Decks. Of course, all of this was built in the wake of Expo 88, and it is that magical moment in Brisbane's history we are celebrating today. 30 years on this day, April 30 years ago, the party kicked off. It's 23 minutes past 3. I am Catherine Feeney, and sitting next to me is a gentleman who's had a little bit of a journey to be here today, Tom Veivers. Good afternoon.
How are you, Catherine?
I'm great. Now, what's your Expo 88 story? You had a pretty important job.
Yeah, well, I was in charge of the Australian Pavilion.
In charge of, just casually, I was in charge of the whole Australian Pavilion, which was one of the standout pavilions at the entire Expo 88 festival. Oh my goodness.
Well, they gave us a very fancy title. Every country's head of their various pavilions was called a Commissioner General.
Gosh.
So there were about 40 countries participated, and of course the Australian Pavilion was the centrepiece of lots and lots of activities. Indeed. All the International Day lunches, for example, were held in the Aussie Pavilion, and we'd have dignitaries from all over the place attending there. Prime Ministers, Deputy Prime Ministers, Foreign Ministers, they'd come out for their National Day. Every country had a National Day. A big ceremony in the amphitheatre with bands and marches and all the beautiful ceremonial stuff, and then afterwards they'd adjourn to the Aussie Pavilion for all the speeches.
Oh, marvellous. So between 30th April and 30th of October, you were the boss of the Australian Pavilion, basically, Tom, and it was the largest pavilion we had at Expo.
Yes, we had about 150 staff.
To build in those days? 18 million?
Well, our total budget was 25 million. Now, that was a lot of money in those days.
Oh, a fair crack at 88.
But that included everything, apart from the construction of the pavilion, its operation, all the other things that had to be done to build around that, the staff payments, of course. I think, did I mention we had about 150 on the staff in pavilion people and support staff. We did get a lot of sponsorship, of course, and I worked very hard on that. My job lasted 2 years.
Oh boy.
A year before, 6 months of the Expo itself, and 6 months afterwards to wind it down. But we got some excellent sponsorship from several people. For example, and this is an interesting part, we had one Australian wine company per month for the 6 months.
Hey, well done.
They sponsored some of their best wines.
Full-bodied Shiraz and a heavy Chardonnay at that time, right?
All that sort of stuff. And the contra deal was we gave them a day where they could invite all their guests in an evening to the pavilion, provided that for them, and they could get their guests, 50, 60, 100 guests, to participate in the function, watch the fireworks on the river stage, which was fantastic every night.
Well, cheers to that, Tom. Now, the Dreamtime stories that played at the Rainbow Serpent Theatre remain, for many people, one of the highlights of Expo 88. How did that come about?
Well, there was tremendous sort of work put into that. I was involved in that on the technical side of it. But there were expert committees set up by the Minister John Brown, and he had an advisory staff. They consulted the Aboriginal people, and it was called the Rainbow Serpent Theatre, a holographic display, and those who have seen it would have been absolutely fascinated with the electronic, if is the best way to describe it, presentation of it. It was designed to show not only Australian people, our visitors, some of the culture of the Aboriginal people, and it was a very, very popular display.
And a powerful statement too. I mean, where Australia was at in terms of recognition of Indigenous Australia at that time demonstrated the forward thinking, I guess, of the organisers behind the Australia Pavilion to make sure that people were exposed to Indigenous culture at that time.
Very true. It was very popular and very successful. But there were lots and lots of other activities. We had a convention and meeting centre. The pavilion was designed to promote Australia in every capacity possible. Arts, business, every centre, every activity in Australia had the opportunity of meeting either annually for their annual meeting or their 6 monthly meetings at the Expo. We made that available to them, provided morning or afternoon tea or a lunch or a dinner as required. And of course that was a huge benefit to the rest of the country, because they had the opportunity, Catherine, to invite people from the other international participants who had guests here all the time. So the relationship that every organisation built by contacting and discussing things with those people was a huge benefit for Australia. I think it's probably the greatest event we've had. Now, that's not denigrating, by the way, the Commonwealth Games in 1982, which was very good for Brisbane.
Oh, well, it was all right. Went all
and
right.
the one on the Gold Coast the other day. But this ran for 6 months.
Yes.
12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Oh, it was
and
on.
you can imagine the activities that took place as a result of that. I'll tell you something very interesting.
Go on.
I probably haven't got much time.
Tom Veivers is with you, by the way.
But the people, there were people who came every day. I'm sure some people know that, every day for the total period of Expo. It was so good. And I'll tell you another interesting thing. The medical profession said it was so popular, a lot of people came here, the incident of psychological and stress in Brisbane dropped because people spent a lot of time here and it was a great place to relax. Now, that's an interesting story.
Now, speaking of psychological stress, Tom Veivers, who was the Commissioner-General of the Australian Pavilion, a pretty important job, as you can imagine, and you've detailed at length all of the extraordinary work that you had to do, which began in earnest on this day 30 years ago.
Yes.
This day is special for you in another way, I understand. Is it,
Oh, yes, that was
your
my wedding anniversary as well.
So you had to make sure you celebrated your wedding anniversary and opened the Australian Pavilion. How'd that go?
Oh, it went pretty well, yeah. My wife Robin was there a lot of the time too. But on opening day, a lot of people don't know this. The Queen was here, of course.
Yes.
The river stage was out here to our left.
Where the city cats pull in and out of now. Yeah.
And she was to step off the royal barge, which was to come up the river from the Britannia, whatever the royal ship was, down up the river and alight from the stage here. Now, the RAAF was to coincide that event with her stepping onto the platform with F-111s flying straight across the sky here in the spectacular fashion. Guess what happened?
What?
It was supposed to coincide exactly as she stepped off. Now, I have a photograph of this home. I should have brought it. Actually, the royal barge was just under the Captain Cook Bridge there.
Oh.
Running late. And I'll tell you
Majesty.
why. Everything else was
Like
worked out
clockwork.
so accurately and specifically. Someone had made one bad mistake somewhere. They didn't realise the tide was running out as fast as it was, so the royal barge was running into it and couldn't quite make it here in time to coincide with that. So that's about one of the few negatives, but a lot of people don't realise that.
All in all, it was a wonderful party. It truly was. And Tom Veivers, as the Commissioner-General of the Australian Pavilion, you played a very instrumental role. And for your hard work, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you for your time and your memories. This is Afternoons. My name is Catherine Feeney. Still plenty to come.